AstrOneironautics, lucid dreaming, the science of the cosmos. AstrOneironautics, lucid dreaming, the science of the cosmos. Now, of course, here on Noom Vibe, this is perhaps not, of course, necessarily the topic of fitness and all that, but we've got all kinds here. And it's not always the thing that I speak about, although it comes up a lot, of course, fitness, because it's a main part of my lifestyle. As a matter of fact, I had the idea that I'm going to time this talk to be in alignment with a video that I recorded of myself today training for endurance on the heavy bag at the gym. And I would use this audio as the background for that. And it's an idea that I wanted to share, so it's going to go on, of course, my YouTube channel and then my podcast on Spreaker, which, if anybody ever becomes interested in any of that stuff, you can find it by all of my social media is the same handle that I have here on Noom Vibe, which is the word Uniquilibrium. So you might be wondering what this amalgam of words here is, AstrOneironautics, and if it even has any relevance to anything at all. Well, of course, I can say it's interesting to me, at least, has relevance to me because of my own interest. But I think in the broader sense, which is also one of the reasons why the topics I chose here on Noom Vibe are not only natural sciences, but social sciences for several reasons. One, and I'll get to the word AstrOneironautics in a moment, but one, it's a social sciences because what I'm about to talk about, as you can see in the title, it says lucid dreaming, the science of the cosmos, is because everyone dreams, for the most part, well, almost everyone. I got to be careful. There's some people who aren't able to dream. Believe it or not, though, even if you're a person who does not remember your dreams, usually you do. But there are some people, I suppose, that aren't not able to. I've got to leave room for that possibility. And so socially, everybody dreams. A lot of people talk about dreams, and we even use the word dream loosely when we talk about our goals and even fantasies and things that we would like to have happen. Say, what are your dreams and goals and ambitions? We use those in the same sentence together, bundle those words, dreams and ambitions. And in the other way this fits into the social sciences is that there is a great need, and I will specifically talk about in the country that I live in right now, the United States of America. There's a great need for the sharing of STEM, or sometimes called STEAM, the subjects, which are science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, and especially for the younger generation, the up-and-coming students, to borrow and paraphrase something that I had read in a 1938 book called Experience and Education by John Dewey. And again, I'm paraphrasing it, but he says, beyond the specific subjects that you teach students and the techniques of how you teach them, the one thing that we ought to instill in students is the love of learning. And that it's through the love of learning that we get people who are lifetime students because they have endless curiosity, and this is the way to go. And for some reason in my mind, that Whitney Houston song is coming in my head. I believe the children are the future. Treat them well and let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty they possess inside. Give them a sense of pride. Wow, the lyrics are actually quite good when I think about it. But that's what this encompasses here, the AstrOneironautics. So now the definition of that. Astro, of course, we know comes from older words that mean star. Mostly we would know astro from Greek and Latin. And there are many variations of that word that means star. There's aster, There's astro, as in astronomy and astrology. There's asterisk, which we might know from that 8-line thing that we see in our computers or our phone. That's opposite the what we think of the pound sign or the number sign. We have astro, asterisk. Uh, it's also actually related to the words Esther. A lot of people may not
Shaking
know
going on.
the name Esther, but also the Esther as in chemistry. And also it's related to the word Easter, which is also where we get East Star. Interestingly enough, the words also go back to West Star, and you can know this if you know Latin, Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese. You have, like in Spanish, for example, the word for east is este, and the word for west is oeste. Uh, and if you say it, it almost sounds like oeste, right? So all of these words and of course they have to do with astronomy and stars and all of that, and where a lot of the ancient worship and sun gods and all that stuff comes from. So that's where the astral part of it. And then there's this word oneiro, which comes from oneiros, which is a Greek god of dreams. And of course, if you look at the nautic part, you have astronauts, right, which are those who go to space, usually traditionally reserved for those who were from the government or NASA who went to space exploration missions. Now, astronauts can be considered a person who gets about 100 kilometers above the Earth. That's at the point where the atmosphere is no longer filtering the sunlight and making the sky look blue, and so now you have the deep black of space and you can see the stars more clearly. That would technically be space. That's where astronauts go. And then there's also a breed of folks for a long time who are called oneironauts, and I fit into that category of people. And an oneironaut is just a term where we are lucid dreamers, as you can see in the title here, lucid dreaming, the science of the cosmos. Now, how do these things come together? Well, again, this is very personal, but it's also very interesting because of how I've observed and experienced it over the years. And I'm going to give some very direct examples of that. And it would be helpful, again, going back to the understanding that I feel like and understand and know, not just believe, but understand and have experienced it. There's a need for people, especially students of all kinds and all ages, to take an interest in science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. And in this country specifically, if you look it up, you'll see really that it's something that we all need to focus on. And a lot of people get intimidated by it because of the mathematics that are involved. And people say, I don't understand math, or I don't get math. I would argue that it's because your teachers suck. That's where a lot of that comes from. And again, referencing the book from John Dewey, Experience and Education, published in 1938, that, and I'll extend it. I'm paraphrasing now and mixing in my own thing, but I would say that the mark of a good teacher is one who does instill that love of learning into students. And if they're not able to do that, can we say that they're good teachers, regardless of what's going on in their personal life? Their duty is to the student. But this is not a political argument or anything like that. I'm not making any negative judgments on people, just from my experience. Right, so this AstrOneironautics. So you've got astronauts that explore space. Oneironauts explore the dream world, specifically lucid dreamers. Now, these two things come together with me and can extend to understanding maybe as a useful tool to helping more people become interested in science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics as it pertains to your personal lives, your personal enrichment, as well as our society as a whole, not just in this country, but on a global level. One of the ways to help all of us to expand and explore is I have some very personal examples of how they both come together. And one of the first ones is fascinating. It's very interesting. It comes from, I'm a person who's fascinated with the moon and the lunar cycles. And I remember reading, I'm not sure if it was just a general science book or if it was some kind of earth science or an astronomy book. But one of the beginning the earlier chapters was, of course, our closest celestial neighbor is the moon. And I've always been fascinated by the moon, of course, because we see it so much, right? You know, a lot of us aren't so interested in the sun all the time because we can't really directly look at it. And, you know, the moon uh, is most visible at night, and it's mysterious because nighttime is mysterious, and it's also scary for some of us. So it has that, you know, mixed appeal going on. And, you know, you can also see features on the moon that you don't on the sun, and people give these different characteristics, like it being made of cheese, or there's a rabbit on there, or a man on the moon, and all that stuff. So the moon holds lots of fascination, and it has for me always. And in this astronomy book, or whatever it is, I'm going to say it's an astronomy book. I remember reading the first chapters were about the moon, besides some of the other stuff that were going on there about the Earth and how it, you know, spins in space and uh, you know, and I got to be careful, right? You know, when I talk about these things, I say spin, but um, on the axis, you know, the sun, the Earth revolves in orbit around the sun, and it rotates on its axis. That's the spin I'm talking about. But that's all the scientific specific terms they would use for those things, you know. Now the I remember reading about that, and then I had this dream. So here comes the dream, and I've been a lucid dreamer ever since I can remember. My first one that I recall that was very significant to me, I was 4 years old, and I didn't make a distinction. I was confused about what happened, and I'll get to that later. But that's how I know how long it's been an experience of mine. Now I remember I wanted to travel to the moon. I was having a dream, and I remember I was dreaming, and I was in the backyard of a house that I lived in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and I was in the backyard. We had a nice backyard where I used to see squirrels running across the fence, and I used to play with my half black lab, half pit bull dog we called Smokey, and we had a turtle named Leonardo that I named after the leader of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles back there, and uh, Leonardo loved to eat mangoes. And you know, they freely hung out in the backyard, Smokey and Leonardo the turtle, and so but this dream was in this backyard, and I wanted to go fly to the moon, and I put on the Iron Man suit. I put on the Iron Man suit from the Iron Man comics. I'm not sure. I think this was much before I'm pretty sure this was much before the movies when I was first learning about this. And I got in the Iron Man suit and I flew straight up into space. And then something happened. I got into space. Remember I talked about earlier, space, you know, is 100 kilometers above the Earth's surface, at least when we get out of the atmosphere's filtering of the sunlight, making the sky blue and all that. But the moon wasn't there. And all of a sudden, I ran out of oxygen and the suit failed. And then it went straight back down and crash landed in my backyard and broke into pieces. And I remember thinking, I was upset. Why didn't this work? And it's interesting because one of the things that happened was I went back to read the book again, and so I went back to read the book again, and I realized, at least this is what I thought was the problem, that I hadn't taken consideration the rotation of the Earth, and that my trajectory towards the moon, I should have taken a curved path in the sky to account for the rotation of the Earth, and that the moon moves in the sky. Now, all of this isn't necessarily scientifically accurate because my suit failed and I landed right back in my backyard. So if the Earth was spinning and I went up there, would I have landed back in my backyard? I don't know. Did Jarvis, my onboard computer, get me back there and make up for something that I didn't take consideration. But I remember going back into the astronomy book and reading about this, and I said, oh, I've got to account for the rotation of the Earth. So my next dreaming cycle, I believe it was the next night or a few nights later, I was in this car that I had, which was a 1989 Ford Probe GT. And I remember driving down the street, and it was some kind of, I had like some kind of feeling of some espionage spy, government contractor type of thing going on. And I got in the car and I was driving, and then the car, all of a sudden I said, all right, forget all this nonsense. I'm getting off the road. And sort of like the DeLorean in the Back to the Future, it started to fly. But this time I thought, I'm going to the moon. And so I programmed in and I took in consideration the trajectory and the spinning of the Earth. And sure enough, I landed on the moon. And it was amazing. And I don't know how I knew some of the stuff I knew about the moon. I think it could possibly be that I read about it. But I remember getting out of the car and I'm on the moon, and it was really cool, but I wasn't freezing. And I mean cool in temperature, not like cool as in the slang term, I mean like it was great. But it was cool. And I remember for some reason I could breathe, but I didn't have a suit on necessarily that prohibited me from being barehanded to the point where I bent down or knelt down, and I put my hand in this stuff that was like sand. But if you can imagine, it was like this very cool sand, but it was sharp and rigid, but it was like a blend of, if you can imagine the sand on the beach and talcum powder, like the stuff that people used to put on babies, the baby powder, right? It was very fine but coarse at the same time. It was very interesting, but I remember it being cool to the touch, and it was grayish and dark in color. And I just remember being so fascinated looking over the moon, and the whole thing was this cool temperature, and the night was black, and everything were these different shades of gray and black, and it was just so fascinating. And then I got back in my car and I landed back at home. And so there is one of the first examples that I had of this astroneuronautics, or at least one of the most clear ones that I have. Gosh, with these sirens going on here, that's a second emergency vehicle, both medical. I hope that whatever's going on, people are okay. And so that's one example of the AstrOneironautics. There is that experience of the going to the moon. So that's one. And I think that that's interesting because my dreams were directly influenced by something that I read in a science book. And it has to do with astronomy and being an astronaut, because I was basically an astronaut. In the dream, I went to space. The first time it failed because I didn't do something scientifically. I didn't take in consideration the rotation of the Earth for my trajectory. And then the second time, using a car instead of an Iron Man suit, I went to the moon and successfully landed and got to experience this cool sand, powdery stuff. They call it regolith that was on the moon. And then successfully came back home. I had a full mission to the moon. It's incredible. And that is interesting also because it was an oneironautic mission, because I was lucid the whole time during the dream. I was controlling the dream for the most part because I went to a mission on the moon. So I got to have this amazing astronaut and oneironaut experience in one. So their science of astronomy and the science of sleep are combined. And some people who may not have experience with lucid dreaming or may not think that it's actually a thing, it's actually been confirmed. Many different laboratories with neuroscientists and neurologists all over the world have done it. There's been some notable experiments with MIT and some other ones where they've had people responding using eye movements in their lucid dreams going to the left or to the right to indicate yes or no if they understand or want to answer a question. So you can look into that. And there, it's touched upon a little bit in the dream, in the book I've talked about before by Matthew Walker, PhD, called Why We Sleep. Good book. Somewhat incomplete in some things. There's a few things in there that he says that I find kind of interesting, but it's a great book overall and good if you want to understand more about what the title of the book says, Why We Sleep. So that's one thing. And so I think that the application of that could be that from my understanding also as a clinical hypnotist and somebody who understands a little bit about the subconscious mind, and from what I know also of other things that influence my dreams, like for example, I used to listen to over and over again an audio recording by Earl Nightingale called The Strangest Secret. And there were times that when I would put it on loop and play it over and over again at night, that there would be sometimes in my dreams where I would be fascinated by somebody who I would end up saying to them, "Wow, you really do a great imitation of Earl Nightingale's voice really well." And it would be a woman, and Earl Nightingale in The Strangest Secret has this voice that says, and he would say, um, you know, and let me tell you about this. Is like he would say, we become what we think about. No, let me say that again. We become what we think about. He's got this very manly man voice from back in the 50s. The recording was 1956, the radio announcer voice. But there would be a woman in my dream saying that, and I would say, wow, you do a really good Earl Nightingale impersonation. And then I would realize, oh, wait, I'm sleeping and I'm listening to the Earl Nightingale recording called The Strangest Secret. And so I know that the things that are in our environment around us can influence and seep into our dreams in many, many ways. And that in some cases, we can learn from these things. And these things can become, in certain cases, embedded into our memory. So we can actually have some sort of sleep learning. And at least I know that we can because I remember those dreams. And of course, part of learning, right, is remembering things, not just by rote memory, right? But having an understanding of things. And just like how my dreams demonstrated to me a little bit of understanding that we need to take into consideration the rotation of the Earth when sending a rocket or a 1989 Ford Probe GT to the moon as a spacecraft, right? Rather than my Iron Man suit that failed because I didn't take that into consideration. So our dreams can actually accurately reproduce things. Now, my other, and so that could be used for, in some ways, actually what I was getting to was that the fact that I know that playing things while we sleep can seep into our dreams, and also studying things before we go to sleep or thinking about things can have an influence in our dreams. And so the one takeaway from this as a behavioral scientist, a clinical hypnotist, is that because I do this all the time now, I'm in this total immersion of subjects that they are constantly in my dreams, and I'm constantly thinking about them because I'm always listening to science audios and different things like that. And so they tend to show up in my dreams, and they're the first things that I think about when I'm waking up, and I've created my own routines because of it. And so this is very important that neuro-linguistic programming, a subset of hypnosis that teaches that we become the sum total, behaviorally and in thoughts, in many ways, character, of the 5 to 7 people we spend most of our time with. And this doesn't have to be people that we are in direct physical contact with, but it could be the audios that we listen to, the videos that we watch, the book that we read, so on and so forth, the things that we're paying most attention to. And so that's a way to apply this. It just shows that, and from my experience, that the things that we immerse ourselves in, it will be part of our mental lives while we're awake and while we're sleeping and dreaming. And if you're a lucid dreamer, you can take advantage of reinforcing these things by having amazing experiences. Now, another experience I had with this was really interesting, where some years later, I had first read Albert Einstein's special theory of relativity that had to do with the speed of light, amongst other things. And I remember this very interesting equation, which is an acceleration equation. If you look into some basic physics books, you'll see the same acceleration equation, which basically says that the if you subtract the time of the initial time from where something started from the ending time where something ended, like a beam of light going from point A to point B, right? And that distance, you can say, for example, if I shoot something from point A to point B and it takes 1 second, and point B is 1 kilometer from point A, we can say that the speed of that thing, right? And I know I'm using speed and acceleration here interchangeably. They're not always the same thing here, but we could say the speed of that thing is 1 kilometer per second, right? And that's the basic equation. And in Einstein's theory of relativity, he showed that the time at point B minus the time at point A being equal to the time at point A minus the time at point B, meaning it went from point A to point B, bounced back and went to point A. They summed that and they got the speed of light from that. And then after reading that, the same night, I had a dream that I was in a javelin fight with zombies. And I was, as I would throw the javelin to the zombie and it would come right back to me. And somehow in the dream, I knew that I was looking at a constant velocity. And in velocity, using the term, it has a vector or a direction, right? So it was going from me to the zombie, and the zombie was throwing it right back to me. And it was at exactly the same speed. It was ridiculous, but incredible at the same time that I was having this oneironautic. This one is not astronautic because I didn't go to space or anything like that. But I was having this oneironautic experience of a scientific fact of the two-way velocity of light, and it was just so fascinating. Again, that's something that I had read showed up in my dream like that. And so I would go on to continue to have experiences like this over and over and over again. It extends to things beyond the natural sciences like astronomy, but I also speak different languages in my dreams. I speak Spanish in my dreams, which I do speak, of course. I speak Brazilian Portuguese in my dreams, and I speak Putonghua, or what we know in the United States or English-speaking countries as Mandarin Chinese. Those are the three languages that I speak most often, that I practice too, and that for some reason, they're ingrained in me. So if I had to say they're my favorites, they are. Although Japanese is something I'd like to study more. But it extends to so many things that not only does science show up in my lucid dreams, but linguistics. I speak 4 different languages in my dreams: English, Spanish, Brazilian Portuguese, and Mandarin Chinese. And on and on and on. This extends to so many things. I compose brand new songs in my dreams. There are poems that come out of my dreams. There are just incredible things over and over and over that come from the dreams. And so this is a fascinating thing. That's why I call this AstrOneironautics, because I study and research a lot of scientific facts and hypotheses and theories and all that, and they show up in my dreams, but also so do so many other things. And so I really feel like this could extend into a way of understanding our minds really take in the information. The things that we consume ourselves and immerse ourselves in with throughout the day really do show up in our minds, in all aspects of our minds. So I think that's a very important thing to take into consideration. So that's it. I really wanted to make that note here and put this term that I created, AstrOneironautics, which is, astronautics and oneironautics, which of course, an astronaut explores space, and now, if you didn't know that before, an oneironaut explores dreams. And usually The word is Oneironaut is reserved for those of us like myself who are lucid dreamers, meaning we become aware that we're dreaming and that we can also, in some cases, control our dreams. So, AstrOneironautics, lucid dreaming, the science of the cosmos. Very fascinating subject that is very dear to me, and I hope that shed some light on some very fascinating subjects that I think that we could all uh, take a look at a little bit more into. All right. Well, I'll keep pushing this little acronym here that I love, Hitman.